Former President Donald Trump ramping up his inflammatory rhetoric.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin.
Where some compared that moment to something that might have happened at a rally in Nazi Germany.
Ba-ba-ba-da-bow. Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Abe Thompson and Other Disappointments. What's going on out there? How you doing? Have you all recovered from the shock reappointment of one David Cameron, of Lord Cameron? How about the Suella letter? How about the scarcely reported, over here at least, not so much over in the US, where I think they're all tearing their hair out about it, the Donald Trump comments, where he was calling his political adversaries vermin. I don't know if you caught that one. Hasn't been on the news here much. Just moving my very delicate mic over here a little bit. Pardon me. Like he's literally using Nazi language now, isn't he? So that's nice. That's, you know, that's a development of sorts, isn't it? Like every day, every week, this guy escalates right in front of us, doesn't he? Just a psychopath escalating in front of our very eyes. And every week, you know, since 2015, 2016, we've all been like, yeah, you might want to like remove him from public life somehow. I don't care how you do it. Just don't know if he's necessarily somebody who should be in public life, in politics. Maybe you want to get rid of him somehow. Like, shouldn't somebody be doing something about this guy? Or, you know, that's been every week since about 2015. And it's 2023 now. So we've had, what is that, 7 years or 8 years? I'm not very good at maths, I'm sorry. 7 or 8 years of, in fact, you know what? Let's work it out. So 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. There you go. 8 years. I feel better now. Though I did just out myself as somebody who still has to count these things on his fingers. So I don't know if I've really, you know, won by doing that. But yeah, so 8 years we've been warning, going like, do you want to just, you know, sort this guy out? Because he's a bit crazy. And for 8 years, nobody has really done anything about him. It's like that scene in Ghostbusters 2, you know? A big fan of pop culture references. I've learnt this from Dane Baptiste the other night. There's a scene in Ghostbusters 2 where the judge is jailing them, right? They're all in the courtroom and they're under like public order or like nuisance charges or something. And the judge is like, he's in the middle of his judgy jailing speech, right? And he's getting more and more angry and fired up as he's saying his judgy speech to them and jailing them. And anyway, as this thing is building up, like Egon and Ray and Peter are like trying to catch this guy's attention. You know, they're trying to sort of draw his attention to these ghosts, these sort of phantoms that are, you know, slowly like building up in the courtroom and stuff. And he's like, I said, be quiet. You know, he's just trying to shut them down. Total dismissal of their warnings. And, you know, in the Ghostbusters, these guys are trying to drag us, like something bad is gonna, can you just look, but over here, look. And he's having none of it. That is what this has felt like for about 8 years. And then, of course, if you're familiar with the movie, it all blows up and all these ghosts and goblins come out and it turns into a right old state. God, I sound like such a dad these days. Oh, it turned into a right old state, so it did. But like everybody's been warning for years that Donald Trump is basically Hitler, haven't they? I mean, I don't need to go through all the Hitlery things that he's done before this, before calling people vermin. He was, he was referring to Mexicans, referring to foreigners as murderers and rapists. He was disparaging the press. You know, anyone that was slightly critical of him within the press world was dismissed as, the failing New York Times, the failing Washington Post, or like all of the others would be fake news. And, you know, it's a bit Hitler-y, isn't it? The famous stand-up comedian Louis C.K., an old comedy hero of mine who I sometimes channel and quote, used to love Louis C.K. Before he went a bit weird, you know, with the old pleasing himself in front of terrified female colleagues thing. But before all of that, he said this in 2016. So this is before Trump actually became president and all of the craziness started. He said this. He said, please stop it with voting for Trump. It was funny for a little while, but the guy is basically Hitler. And by that, I mean that we are being Germany in the 1930s. Do you think they saw all that stuff coming? Hitler was just some hilarious and refreshing dude with a weird comb over who would say anything at all. Shall I finish this? Shall I continue? This is from an email that he sent to his fan base back then, before Trump became president and before the escalations really started, although he was still, you know, obviously hugely problematic. So it continues. It says, but it only works if the Conservatives put up a good candidate, a good, smart I think this is a bit further on in the letter. Sorry. So like he's talking about the balance of like liberals versus conservatives, and he actually is for like the Conservatives having a president every now and then. He says, but it only works if the Conservatives put up a good candidate, a good, smart conservative to face the liberal candidate so they can have a good argument and the country can decide which way to go this time. Trump is not that. He's an insane bigot. He is dangerous. And then it carries on. It says, he's not a monster. He's a sad man. But all this makes him horribly dangerous if he becomes president. Give him another TV show. Let him pay to put his name on buildings. But please stop voting for him. So, yeah, that was in 2016. You know? And since then, I mean, he hasn't got saner, has he? He hasn't got less dictatory since 2016. I mean, in those 8 years, I think we've established now, in those 8 years, he's tried to upend his own democracy. He stood back while his MAGA nut jobs treated the Capitol building like a cosplay adventure playground. Do you remember that? I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, what are they doing? He's calling everyone vermin now. And now, like, the latest thing is he's threatening to put immigrants in detention camps. Literal detention camps. With his... And I know a lot of you will be thinking, like, yeah, but sometimes they say this stuff to rile at the base, and then, you know, everyone loses their minds, and then it doesn't turn into anything, and, you know... Like when Priti Patel said she was going to install wave machines in the English Channel. Like, that seemed really callous and over the top, and everyone lost their shit about it. But until everyone reminded themselves, well, yeah, but that would never... that would literally never... You can't do that. The English Channel isn't Coral Reef. Just settle down. But anyway, they say they're going to create these detention camps for people, and you know, a lot of us will be like, well, hang on a second, you can't do that. And then his spokesman has clapped back saying, like, don't think we're playing with this. We're deadly serious about this. We are going to do this. I mean, it's not un-Hitlery, is it? Just be real with me. That's not like Hitler, is it? It's not Hitler-esque. Like, for all the talk of, you know, snowflake hysteria, whenever people on the left clutch their pearls and point at a concerning thing, you know, and then people on the right go like, oh, you're being hysterical. Come on, Aid, pull it together. You're being hysterical. What's wrong with you? Just settle down. Have you been radicalized, Aid, by The Guardian and The Mirror and MSNBC and CNN clips all over Twitter? Are you radicalized now? Just... settle down. Look out the window. It's fine. You're being hysterical, Aid. you know? But can we at least agree that this is, you know, it's in the neighbourhood of Hitler now, isn't it? Can we just agree that? I mean, Hitler rounded his scapegoats up, right, and stuffed them in concentration camps. That's what he did. That is a fact in history. Trump is saying he's going to round his scapegoats up and put them in detention camps. That's what he's saying. That is also a fact. I mean, just call them what they are, Trump, all right? Like, they're concentration camps too, aren't they? I realise that puts you in a bit of a quandary because you lot like to wave your flags around and get all nationalistic and gloat about the wars that you've won in the past, and one of those wars happened to be against Nazis. However, this one, you're doing the Nazi dance yourself. So I appreciate you might not want to terminalise it. God, is that even a word? What is wrong with me today? But you see what I'm saying? Like detention camps, concentration camps. It's just, you know, they're going to be the same thing, aren't they? You round up your immigrants, you stuff them in a camp, and then you work out what to do with them. And this is from the Washington Post, right? The other day. And it is a sobering read, guys, which makes it sad for two reasons on this show, doesn't it? Because, you know, if there's one thing I don't like, it's authoritarian dictators, obviously. But, you know, if you're going to add in sobering me up to the conversation as well, then we're going to have a problem. We are, you know, I can't go through this stuff sober. So this is in the Washington Post. It's by a guy called Greg Sargent. And the headline says, Trump's plan for giant detention camps points to a brutal 2024 reality. Donald Trump's advisors have declared that if he regains the presidency, he will launch an extraordinarily cruel crackdown on immigration. It says that when things are bad on the border in the US, the political trends are usually that people turn on the incumbent, and that they typically do that regardless of how extreme the challenger candidate, in this case, that's Trump, is with what they're suggesting. It's sort of, they look at it like an opposites effect, you know? Anyway, it goes on. It says that they're going to take detention camps, right, which already exist in terms of being an illegal immigrant or, you know, a refugee waiting for your claim to be processed or whatever. They're going to take these detention camps and they're going to vastly expand the network of them. And they cite Trump's advisor, it's a guy called Stephen Miller, and they say this expanded network would facilitate the deportation of millions of undocumented immigrants, including long-time residents with deep ties to the communities. You know, like, just take that in for a minute. In Trump's America, or Trump 2.0's America, you're going to have a presidentially sanctioned force rounding up the foreigners, some of who have built lives and families, deep ties to the communities, it says. You're going to round all of those up and stuff them in a vastly expanded network of detention camps with a view to chucking them out of the country. That's what we're talking about here. It says in the article here, you'd have detention of people seeking asylum, which would be subject to shocking new limits. Trump would reinstate his ban on migrants from majority Muslim countries, invoke new legal authorities to pursue mass expulsions, and enlist the military to help them carry it out. So, yeah, very much rounding up foreigners and chucking them out, with a pit stop in a concentration camp along the way, no matter how long they've lived in the United States. That is what's happening if Trump gets a second term. And I'm sure, like, I don't need to remind you guys of the parallels of this with like this and Hitler, right? And what could come next after this. Because Hitler didn't just start off murdering 6 million Jews, you know? Like, this is the thing that's like always lost on the flag fuckers, isn't it? They vaguely learned briefly in school decades ago about what happened in Europe, didn't they? They sort of have a passing familiarity with what took place. And they banked that information, but like with purely face value, like symbolism heavy levels of intellect, you know? Like they don't think back to Germany and 6 million Jews and think of the contributing factors and the political machinations that fermented the landscape to allow all of that to take place. They don't trouble themselves thinking about all of that. That's critical thinking. That's factoring things in. All they think about is, oh, yeah, no, Hitler was a baddie, wasn't he? He was just bad, just inexplicably bad, yeah. And he waved this flag over there. And as long as nobody's speaking German or waving that specific flag here, well, then they can't possibly be a Nazi or a fascist, can they? Like it's almost childlike, isn't it? Just a very base level, childlike, symbolism heavy understanding or comprehension of what took place then and what is taking place now. I mean, it's sort of, you know, ironically, the sort of stupidity that gets people like me thinking, well, maybe we need to round all of these people up and, you know, lock them in a re-education camp for a couple of years. You know, you can come out when you're less stupid, when you've learned some shit. You know, people emerge from this camp like 3 years later, smiling with a diploma. It'd be amazing. Like, you think your mum and dad were proud of you when you got your GCSEs? Just wait till Gary from Dagenham's parents welcome him outside the gates to Camp Cretin and he's no longer a moron. And he's like, oh no, I get it now. I get it. Like he was exploiting people's fears and prejudices to get more power and enrich himself. I understand. And his parents are like, oh, we're so proud of you, son. We're so proud, Gary. Anyway. Oh, what was I saying? Oh, yes. So a lot of people dismiss fears of Trump being another Hitler based on the fact that he's not German, which is, yeah, it's true. He has an American flag, not a Nazi one, which is also true. You know, you can't argue with that, guys. What else? What else can you imagine his base coming out with if you said, don't you think Trump is a little bit Hitlery? You know? What else would they come out with, guys? I mean, they would probably highlight the fact that he's killed way fewer Jews as well, wouldn't they? I mean, like, I don't know. Full disclosure, guys. I don't know if he's killed any. He's probably not killed any Jews whatsoever, but I don't know. You know, I don't know that for sure, guys. Full transparency on this show. I do not have a confirmed number of Jews that Donald Trump has killed to hand. I don't have researchers. I don't really have much of a budget. So, unfortunately, I'm a bit embarrassed by it. I don't have that information to hand. But they would look at the 6 million Jews figure and the different flags and, you know, and that's it. That's enough for them. They would be like, well, no, they're different then, right? That's all it takes. These are totally different people. It's like it's amazing, really, isn't it? How when it comes to Biden and Karl Marx or Barack Obama and Che Guevara, right? They're like, these people are the same. Obama is basically Che Guevara. If you like Obama, you should just go live in Venezuela. Biden is a Marxist. But if you try to get them to consider even a demonstrable academic similarity with Trump and Hitler, then they're like, what are you talking about? These are totally different people. You don't know what you're saying. Because the flags, the slogans, the language, the people that they hurt, and they're different. So they're different people. They're not the same. And then you're like, oh, God. Okay, well, yeah, so, yeah. So now we've got nuance, do we? Okay, cool. It's all right. Calm down, guys. Now we're going for nuance, apparently. You know, the nuance of different colours on a flag, on the fabric that is draped down at their rallies, you know, and the type of foreigner that they're rounding up. You got to get in the details, son. Different flags, different languages being spoken, different filthy, insipid vermin being rounded up and put into camps. So they're totally different. Once you overlook the superficiality and you get into the nuance, I knew that you was worried, and I'm happy to clear all that up for you, son. Well, what do you think about Joe Biden? Well, he's a radical left Marxist communist traitor. It's Joe Biden. All right, okay, so no different flags, different faces, languages being spoken there. No nuance to be found there, Hank? No? Nope, absolutely none. But yeah, this is how the Hitler stuff started, man. Like, that's what gets me. It's like, you know, Hitler didn't just start off murdering 6 million Jews. He didn't wake up on some gloomy Monday having failed to sell a painting again at the weekend art fair. Woke up on Monday morning depressed and hungover. You know, I will never be a painter at this rate. It's time to kill the Jews about it. You know, that is what happened. It wasn't instant. He rose to political prominence with a sort of subservient media and populism and propaganda and rallies. And he put people into camps to start with. And then when he couldn't persuade other countries to take the people that he wanted to boot out, he engineered a network of industrial scale murder. That is what happened. Where are we now on that historical trajectory? Like, it starts with populism. And it graduates to rounding people up and promising to kick them out. And it ends with a failure to do that because, you know, honestly, like if you're a dictator saying, I don't want I don't know why I'm still doing the accent. If you're a dictator and you say, I don't want filthy foreigners in my country, they're a scourge, they're murderers, they're rapists, they're vermin. If that's your rhetoric, is that what you're saying, right? If you're a dictator saying that, why would any of your right-wing dictator friends want to take them in from you? Like, it's a hard sell, isn't it? Like, they're not going to help you out with this. Either they're too right-wing and they won't want the foreigners coming in, or you've sold them the foreigners as though they're filthy, disgusting rapists and vermin and shit. So none of your right-wing dictator friends are going to do business with you. They're just not. I mean, in Hitler's case, this would have been his, you know, back in, you know, the 1930s, this would have been his contemporaries. But obviously in Trump's, it's like who? Like, it's Orban, Kim Jong-un, Putin. Like, none of them are going to take in Trump's immigrants, are they? Let's be real. And none of the people who hate him, you know, the centre-left, progressive, Western liberal democracy types, they're not going to help him either. Because they hate him. They're not going to do a deal with the fascist dictator. So where is that going to leave him? That's the question. That is a dangerous spot to put somebody like that in. Where does it leave him? Humiliated, you know? Faced with a very public failure of exiting his foreigners, his immigrants, and then he would have like a huge cost of running this. I mean, like, the US already has an industrial scale prison system, you know, of fucking supermax jails and 3 strikes laws and decades-long sentencing. So it's just overcrowded to fuck. It really is. And because it's so busy and there's so many of these jails, like, the cost is colossal. Which I suppose is why they privatize so much of it. I don't know if you're aware of that, but over in the US, it's a heavily privatized jail system. But the fucking debt, man. The debt the US government would get into if they built and continue to have to facilitate a national network of immigrant jails. Like, in a country built on immigration, that's what's so fucking wild about this. It's like America would be nothing without immigrants. Anyway, this network of immigrant jails, these concentration camps, let's call them what they are. Now, against the backdrop of this failing policy, this hugely costly failing policy, and just this constant influx of new immigrants, new Muslims, new refugees, and none of the old ones getting out, just packing into the jails, and it's just getting so busy and so expensive. Like, he would have to admit it was bullshit and wind it down, humiliated, neutered, angering his base, right? Or he'd have to murder them. Oh no, Yate. Oh, come on. You're being hysterical now. Like, can somebody explain to me how else he would wriggle out of that humiliation? Can you? You've got a sociopath who hates being a loser. You got a loser who hates playing by the rules. Like, are we seriously just sitting here while he escalates to vermin and detention camps? And we're still going like, oh yeah, well, probably won't take it any further than that, though, will he? I know he's following the trajectory of Hitler perfectly. I know that all of the warning lights are just flashing. Beep, 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 beep. But it probably won't get any worse than this. Like, really? You really don't think it's going to escalate any further? Yeah, because he's not speaking German and he doesn't have a silly little mustache. Like, oh, God. Give me that diploma, Hank. Just give it here. You've forgotten what they taught you, haven't you, already? Right? What are you doing? Give me that back. I earned that. Back you go. Back into the re-education camp. No, I don't want to go back in there. 3 more years, Hank. In you go. No! Such is the radicalization of both the left and the right. Now, you know, the right want to round us all up and put us into dissident detention camps, while the left want to put everyone into re-education centres. Everything's detention and re-education, isn't it? Everything's back to school in America in a way that gets you just praying for an active shooter. I mean, I suppose the one redeeming thing, right, about Trump and his, you know, newly promoted immigration policy is that however gross it sounds, however problematic and troublingly familiar it might sound, you have to remind yourself that this is a guy who couldn't even build a fucking wall when it was a cornerstone of his original campaign. You know, I mean, it was basically the guy's catchphrase, wasn't it? Build the wall! Build the wall! Remember that? And now he's like, you know, I'm going to build a state-of-the-art complex network of detention centers. Oh, really? Are you? How? How are you going to do that? I mean, one wall was too much for you. So maybe just start small, Donny, okay? Baby steps. Maybe we start you off with something, get you some early learning center Duplos and a Lego set. And he's like, I could do it. I could build a network of concentration. Wait, I mean, detention centers. Like, somebody needs to pull him aside. Some like aide or, you know, secretary or, you know, executive assistant, whatever sort of help he has. Somebody needs to like tap him on the shoulder and be like, maybe you want to, sort out your civil case first. Like, I could build them. Like, you're not going to be building anything anytime soon. I know you did this building and that golf course and all the rest of it, but you're going to be lucky if you can hold on to Trump Tower at this rate. Like, how about you focus on holding on to Trump Tower and Mar-a-Lago off the back of your civil case, you nutty bastard. But yeah, building a network of these things. I mean, do we really think he's capable of directing strategically the building out of an immigration detention network. I don't know if I'm convinced that he possesses the news to be able to achieve that. Like, I'd love to be a fly on the wall when he has these sort of planning and policy and communication strategy meetings, you know, chief strategist to Donald Trump. Like, what must that be like when they're talking about what they're going to go to market with, you know? And he's like, I'm going to build a network of detention centers for immigrants. Like, wouldn't your strategist just be like, oh my God, like you couldn't build one wall, Donnie. You could, like, Steve Bannon used to be your number one guy. He ended up jailed for defrauding the project. You couldn't even get one project out of the way without defrauding and court cases and arrests and jailing. He defrauds you of $100,000. You got robbed and ended up with no wall. I mean, that is some serious, like, art of the deal shit right there, Donnie. I mean, it's no wonder he hates foreigners. Let's just focus on that for a minute. It's no wonder that he hates foreigners, because I bet every time someone comes knocking on his door offering him, like, to build his garden wall, you know, like a hooky sort of foreignery, illegal immigrant, like, yeah, I could totally build you a wall, man. I could, Mr. Trump, if you just sub me some money, I could build you. It'll be the best wall you ever see. And he's like, all right, I love walls, you know. Every time he gets like a foreigner coming up, knocking on his door, offering to do, he ends up with no wall and his whole house burgled or some shit. And he's like, Melania, it's happened again. I'm sorry. Anyway. Fucking idiot. What else is going on? The Rwanda verdict is due back today. It's Wednesday as I'm recording this. Frequent viewers, listeners, binfluencers and boosters alike will know that the Rwanda policy is, of course, Suella Braverman's flagship policy, guys. It was her dream. It was her obsession to see a plane load of asylum seekers sent off to a third country. Not dissimilar to Donald Trump's latest idea, really, is it? It's, it's kind of in the same neighborhood. You don't need to scratch beneath the nuance or symbolism or anything to see the similarities there. I mean, it's the same shit, isn't it? It's, it's all nations in decline. They haven't got a clue as to how to solve the problems that we're actually faced with. Which is essentially that, fossil fuels are becoming more expensive. They're harder to find. They're more dangerous to drill out. Plus, the situation in Ukraine hasn't helped. Saudi Arabia are restricting their oil production to keep their prices high to make money back that they lost in COVID. And so, anyway, everything is linked to the cost of power, energy, heating, cooling, which is basically everything, right? Like food, drinks, transport, healthcare, toothpaste, toys. Everything goes back to fuels and power. And so inflation is soaring, which makes central banks raise interest rates, which makes us all broke. We all know this stuff, right? I've talked about this many, many times. So they can't fix that problem. But nobody votes for somebody who stood up there, shrugging, go like, whoa, I can't fix the problem. So instead what they do is they fire breathe populism, and they pretend that there are easy answers to complex, if not completely unanswerable questions. It's Trump saying that we got to get back to the real America, whatever that was, or whenever that took place, or make America great again, somehow. No specifics, just symbolism and flags, easy answers to complex questions. It's Braverman and Farage pretending that the reason that you can't get a GP appointment, or that you had to sit 27 hours waiting to be seen in A&E, is not because the debt to GDP is so outrageous and there's no way to resolve it, and there's an aging population, and every year more people are rolling off of the workforce and going into retirement and require nursing homes, social care, and fewer people are having babies to pick up the slack and earn tax money to pay for all of that. And you're not letting immigrants in, so they're not plugging the gap either. So things are getting worse and shitter, and we're a nation in decline, and that's why you can't get a GP appointment. That is a complex thing to communicate to people, way harder, infinitely harder than just the reason you couldn't get a GP appointment, Gary, is because a brown person took it. What are you going to do about it? You know? Easy answers to complex questions. Like I've said it before, and I'll say it again, because, you know, the truth bears repeating, firstly. But secondly, because there's a limit to my creativity and endlessly firing synapses in my brain. You know, yes, you're in the premium bourgeoisie tier of political podcasts. Yes, you're in the hashtag booge tier. But no, I can't always be pitching in with my A game every second of every day. But I've said it before. If you want to bring down net migration, and if it's not just about xenophobia, which all of you lot seem very, very emphatically to refute, you know, it's not about xenophobia. I'm definitely not a racist. I just care about net migration. If it's just about net migration and it's not about xenophobia, just make it easier for me to fuck off. Because that will bring down net migration too. Because allow me to shock you and really amp up the Daily Express's blood pressure for a moment. But when people say, we have to bring down net migration, right? And, if you don't like it, leave, you know? They always act like we're desperate to stay, do they? Like we're always going to fight back with some defiant alternative mode of patriotism, don't they? Meanwhile, like, I'm fired up. And I'm clapping back with a mouthful of brandy like, newsflash, fucker, I don't even want to be here. This country is done. It's fucked. You fucked it. The national debt is colossal. They have no money to fix anything. It's not going to get better. I'm sorry to tell you. They're all babbling about net migration figures, you know, frustrated about the number of people coming in versus the slightly smaller number of people, you know, emigrating, leaving. You obviously can't fix the number of people coming in. You've been trying for fucking years, lads. And it's only gotten worse for you. That's the tragic thing. Do you remember when Cameron was Prime Minister and he was like, no ifs, no buts, we will reduce net migration to the tens of thousands. Rather than, so he's going to bring it down to under 100,000. No, you're not. It's not going down to 100,000. It's going up 6 times that, even after you leave the EU. So here's my question. You know, if you can't fix the number coming in, why don't you just make it easier for people like me to fuck off? Put me on a plane. Round people like me up. I'll fuck around and arrest myself. Phone up the police, like give them a tip-off. Out myself as a dissident or some shit like. Anyway, look, just quickly. Braverman's policy, Air Suella, has been grounded for a while now, obviously, by supposedly lefty lawyers, activist lawyers, which is, you know, it's always funny to me because when it's Geoffrey Cox overruling international law in a limited and specific way, or when it's Braverman herself breaking domestic and international law. And those two are lawyers themselves, right? When it's them circumventing and overruling the actual law, that isn't activist laws and lawyers, no? Really? But yeah, like when it's a lawyer making a case to a judge and a judge going, yeah, okay, well, look, I've looked at all of the arguments, pros and cons. I've listened to you and I've listened to you. Actually, I think I'm going to go. So, like, oh, that's lawyers being activisty, is it? Okay, cool. Right, fine. Anyway, so it's been grounded. It was appealed and then it's gone up to the Supreme Court. And today we're going to hear the verdict, aren't we? And that verdict is the answer to the question, is it right to bundle up a load of foreigners and send them off to another country? That's the question the Supreme Court are seeking to answer. And it's no doubt a question that will be asked in America's Supreme Court at some point, won't it? by lawyers pushing back on whatever final form Trump's policy idea thing takes. And it's like, God, over here we've got the Rwanda policy, which, even if the Supreme Court shut it down, it's still going to empower the British government, as it is at the moment, Team Sunak, to attempt to leave the European Court of Human Rights. So it's like lose-lose. And in America, they are actually seriously entertaining booting people out of the country via glorified concentration camps. What a dire state of affairs the Western world is in right now. These complex questions, all rooted back to human survival, finite resources, fossil fuels, and both sides of the Atlantic, former world leaders, nation states, leaders of the free world, cheerleaders of freedom, democracy, former beacons of ingenuity, God, I can't say that word, and innovation, are so keen to show us that the best they can do in terms of meeting this challenge is to reverse ferret 100 years and round up the foreigners. Fuck me, I need a drink. Guys, that's it for this one. Thank you so much, as always, to the Patreon backers, of which we got a new one joining our little cult the other day, the Bintfluencer cult. For the benefit of new listeners and viewers on YouTube, I'm not an influencer, even though you may have found me on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. I'm not an influencer, I'm a Bintfluencer. It's a very different thing. It means I'm not going to show you pictures of nice food. I'm not going to tell you to join me for squat day at the gym and live your best life. It's Binfluencer, right? It's where I show you the muck of the modern world and then I just shrug. I go, yes, gross. You should just fucking drink with me, That's my vibe. That's the vibe of the show. Anyway, so yes, new inductee to the Bintfluencer cult over on patreon.com/Aid Thompson. Welcome to Rachel Harris. My first entry in the utterly ridiculous tier. I've got 4 tiers there that you can join. They start at just £3 a month, £3, £5, £10, or the utterly ridiculous one, which is £50 a month. So there is not a word that can adequately describe my gratitude to Rachel for joining. And I should probably mention, whether you join on £3 or £5 or £10 or £50, obviously there's sort of cascading, crescendoing benefits to each tier. So jump on there, take a look. If you are enjoying, 2, 3, 4 different episodes of the show, and you would like to support it, and you would like to get, episodes of it 2 days before everyone else, and first dibs on the tickets to the live show, and the London meetups that I do, and the Discord chats. I jump in there every day and we talk about life, love, the universe, all of that stuff. I also throw in a monthly, I say monthly, I haven't done one for 2 months actually, a monthly Skype 1-to-1. That's with yours truly. We can have a beer, talk about the podcast, politics, whatever's your fancy. God, I really do sound like a dad today. Whatever's your fancy, and it's a right old state of affairs. Anyway, so yeah, if you're keen on the podcast, if you're enjoying my output, do consider Patreon. You also get credited at the end of shows like this. So big shouts to Rachel Harris, Bowman, Kai, Chris D, David Voice, Martin Maracas, Mojo Sabian, Oliver Stevens, Pingu, Stewart, Peter Del Monte, T-Rex, Aaron Smith, Alex Suter, Alex Tooth, Jeff McGow, Mark Harris, Ned Berg, Ricardo Oliveira, Sarah Setters, and Simon Flack. Flack, sorry. Thank you so much, guys, for your ongoing support of the show and my output on YouTube and everything. So, yeah, big doff at the cap to you guys. I'll be back Friday night this week with Graham Hughes of Labour Social. He's my guest. Until next time, keep it strictly #Binfluencer, and I'm out this motherfucker.